Hi, my name is Ark, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make a slip roll effect. This is going to be part one of a tutorial series that I'm making to create something that you can be throwing into any one of your Ableton live performance rigs that will be very similar in nature to Pioneer's DJM 2000 beat effects. So we're going to begin with the slip roll effect because this is the one I've been bashing my head against the wall for some time trying to figure out how to make. Internet forums weren't giving me an answer. Everybody just ended up giving me advice to create just a regular beat roll or something you might call it's the same thing as a beat masher, loop roll, whatever product you're using. They've got a different name for the same effect. So we're going to be making the slip roll effect. What a slip roll does is it resamples every time you trigger the interval, the beat interval on the effect. So if the song is playing and I start the effect and I sample a quarter note out of it, then it's going to resample a quarter note every time I hit the quarter note interval on the effects bank. So here's a demonstration. Okay, so I'm sure you heard it. I try to make it pretty obvious. I played around with both a quarter note and eighth note interval. So I'm going to show you how to get this all set up because it's actually pretty simple, but it's not straightforward. So first we're going to drop in a beat repeat and this empty effect rack. This empty rack is very important. Towards the end of things, we're going to come back and address it, but it's going to become an audio gate, so we're not getting a big distorted signal at the end of things. So go ahead and map the chain selector to a macro and then group both the beat repeat and the empty rack together. Open this up, go ahead, map that. I'm going to change the name to interval. And here I'm going to change this to eighth note, A. Okay, now we're going to just change these down to all to be eighth note values. Okay, we're going to turn repeat on. Chance is going to go all the way down, and we're going to switch it to insert mode. Okay, then we're going to duplicate this. We're going to rename it eighth note B. We're going to turn that off and that off. Later on, we're going to come back and create a toggle between the two so we get the continuous looping effect until we want to resample. This is the easiest way to do it without a bunch of complex IAC busing that takes up unnecessary CPU. Anybody into the live performance world will tell you that CPU issues are probably the biggest battle. Okay, so we have that taken care of now. I like color to keep things like this organized, especially since I'm going to duplicate it. Okay, I'm not going to change the name, although these are going to be our quarter notes. I'm just going to change the color for each one. This will be our half notes. And finally, these will be our bar. Okay, so come back into the eighth notes, or the quarter notes rather, and change the values in beat repeat to reflect that. So that's now a quarter, that's a quarter, that's a quarter, that's a quarter. Just going to go through and do all of these the same. Now you don't really have to set offset. I just think it sounds cleaner for whatever reason. If you don't want to, I don't think you need to. Okay, that's all of those set. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and now create another audio group so we can create our dry wet knob. Just call that just dry. Dry, wet. Open up the chain here, select both, and drag this all the way out. Just for the wet, we're going to pull just the white bar all the way over to the top and then reverse for the dry and bring it all the way to the back. This creates a nice gentle fade between one to the next. I brought back the end of the dry just one value from 127 to 126. That way when we are all the way wet, we do not have any of the dry signal coming through. However, we do need some of the wet, or we do need some signal coming through the wet chain so that the beat repeats actually have something to sample from. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and map this to a macro and call that dry wet. And let's go ahead and map the interval to macro 2 because I like them all coming to the same rack. That's just the way I work organizationally. Now we get to do some MIDI mapping. So we're going to just assign a knob that we like for dry wet. And this is where the mapping gets important. So on my controller, I've got 4 buttons in a row next to each other, left to right. And we've got 4 different intervals that we are trying to map. The 8th note, quarter note, half note, 1 bar. So I'm going to use the leftmost button as 8th note and work larger to the right. As I'm holding down the 8th note button still, I'm going to very next to the right, select quarter, then next to the right, half, and then finally bar. So this creates a range right here. It says C2 to D sharp minus 2. This is how people create faders out of buttons. It also works well for knobs. So now you'll see it jumps whenever I hit the button on my pad that I want to hit. That is then why this empty effects track that we created at the beginning is important. See this little green dot? If that green dot is not lined up with that blue bar, then no audio will come through this chain. So we come back here to our first instance and we hit the 8th note button on our MIDI controller that we just mapped, and the green dot will move to where the 8th notes have to be. So the chain is already set up by default 8th notes at 0. We don't need to change anything there. But for the quarter notes, hit the quarter note button and you'll see that green bar, or the green dot is over there. So I moved the blue bar. Same thing with the B instance of the quarter note. Now go ahead and hit your half bar button and move the half bars over. And finally, full bar, which should be all the way at the very end. Okay, and for our final little bits of MIDI mapping, we're just going to create an on-off button for our effect rack, and then now create these toggles for in between A and B of each instance here. So start with the eighth notes. Go ahead and click the sound button there and map it to the eighth note button that you mapped earlier, and then also map repeat to the same button, and do the same thing for the B instance. Okay, now same thing but with the quarter note button for the quarter note instances. Again for half note with the half note button, and bar for the bar button. Okay. So now what we should have is our effects rack totally set up. So I'm just going to move this on over here and give it a try. Okay, there it is. We now have a slip roll effect that you can rename the whole audio rack and save it for yourself and drop it into your template later. Hope this was helpful to you, and I'll try to come out with the next tutorial by next week. It'll be covering a reverb. Now there's going to be other beat style effects like this slip roll that we come out with, but I want to approach the next side of things, effects with tails, and how you get it to where that tail is allowed to come through, which is a little bit different in the rack programming. Anyway, like I said, this is it for today, and I'll catch you next time. Auric out.